They never expected you to wake up. They counted on your silence, on your softness, on your need to be good, to be kind, to keep the peace no matter the cost. They fed on your empathy like it was theirs to take. And they smiled while you slowly disappeared. But something is shifting. Because one day the empath, the emotional caretaker, the sponge for everyone else's darkness, stops absorbing and starts seeing, starts choosing, starts burning. And in that moment, something happens that Carl Jung said would terrify every narcissist, every manipulator, every system built on emotional control. You become psychologically untouchable, not cruel, not vengeful, but sovereign. And that is far more dangerous. Jung warned, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But for the empath, accepting yourself means owning what you were conditioned to fear. Your anger, your intuition, your boundaries, your right to say no without guilt. This video will change how you see yourself and how you see every relationship you've ever had. Because narcissists don't fear confrontation. They feed on it. What they fear is your clarity, your stillness, your withdrawal. So here's the question you must stay for. What really happens when the empath finally says, enough? Why does the narcissist collapse? And how does the empath become the most powerful force in the room without ever raising their voice? We'll break it all down through Jung's deepest teachings, real-world examples, and a journey into shadow so raw it could rewrite your story. But first, let me say this. If you've ever been told you're too sensitive, if you've been guilted for your boundaries or gaslit for your emotions, if you've lost yourself while loving someone else too much, you're not weak, you're not broken, you're not too much. You are exactly what this world fears. Because when an empath wakes up, they don't just walk away, they rise. And when they do, everything false begins to fall. Stay with me. Let's begin. It begins the way it always does, with love. With the quiet child who learns that their safety depends on reading the room faster than anyone else. They become experts in unspoken needs, body language, invisible rules. And in doing so, they begin to disappear. Empaths don't just feel deeply. They feel for everyone. They take in their father's rage, their mother's sadness, their friend's guilt, their partner's chaos. They absorb what others cannot face and hold it silently, believing that this is what love looks like. In Jungian terms, the empath becomes a container for others' shadow material. The empath becomes a vessel for the unclaimed shadow of everyone around them. They hold what others reject, the rage no one expresses, the grief that never gets cried, the manipulation that never gets named. And they do this not because they are weak, but because they are wired for depth. Dr. Judith Orloff's work confirms what Jung intuited decades ago. Empaths have hyperactive mirror neurons. Their brains are designed to pick up subtle emotional signals even before others are aware of them. But what begins as a gift becomes a curse, because the empath hasn't yet learned one thing. Where do I end and where do you begin? And so, the giving continues. The harmonizing, the rescuing, the spiritual bypassing. The empath wears kindness like armor and calls burnout love. They say yes while their body says no. They shrink themselves to keep the peace, while silently screaming inside. But every soul has a threshold. Jung believed that when we repress too much, the psyche pushes back. And for the empath, that push comes like a quake, sudden, unstoppable. It often arrives after betrayal, exhaustion, or a moment of searing clarity. They see the pattern, the narcissist's gaslighting, the way their love is always a test, the way they're always made to feel like the problem. And then it happens. They say enough. The empath no longer seeks to be understood by the person committed to misunderstanding them. They stop explaining themselves to the manipulator. They stop apologizing for existing. This is the moment Jung called the shadow's return. The empath, who once buried their anger and boundaries, now reclaims them. And it doesn't come as rage, it comes as clarity. A stillness so deep, it unsettles the very person who once fed off their chaos. Because now the empath sees the game and refuses to play it. This is not the end of the empath. This is their beginning. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is where the journey truly begins, not by fleeing from your shadow, but by turning toward it. For the empath, this means meeting every part of yourself you were taught to silence. Your anger, your truth, your refusal, your boundaries. You were conditioned to think that your compassion was only real if it came at your expense. That saying no was selfish, that your anger made you dangerous. But Jung knew the truth. The shadow is not evil by nature. It consists of all the qualities we possess, but deny. And for the empath, the shadow isn't just a personal vault of suppressed feelings. It's a warehouse filled with the collective wounds of everyone they've ever loved. The rage their father repressed, the shame their mother projected, the grief their partner buried. The empath has been the unconscious dumping ground for all of it. Until now. The shadow begins to rise, not to destroy you, but to free you. You feel the first flicker of fire when someone crosses your boundary, and instead of collapsing into guilt, you stand your ground. You hear the voice you buried long ago whisper, "No more." And this time, you listen. You begin to realize your anger isn't cruelty, it's clarity. Your selfishness is actually self-respect. Your coldness is simply the heat of withheld energy returning to you. This is the moment Jung described as the alchemical shift, when the lead of pain transforms into the gold of awareness. You're not reacting anymore. You're reclaiming. And this reclamation isn't loud or violent. It's measured, precise, surgical. You begin to draw boundaries not to punish, but to protect. You stop absorbing other people's suffering as your own. You stop saying yes when your soul screams no. You start choosing yourself, not because you don't love others, but because you finally learned what self-love actually looks like. And in doing so, the shadow no longer threatens you. It becomes your ally. It whispers truth when others lie. It stands with you when guilt tries to trick you back into compliance. It becomes your compass, not away from others, but back toward yourself. Jung called this the transcendent function, the unification of opposites. You are no longer all light, nor all shadow. You are the conscious integration of both. You don't have to choose between softness and strength, empathy and boundaries, connection and sovereignty. You are all of it. And that is exactly what makes you dangerous to those who once relied on your unconsciousness. You now see manipulation as it forms, not after the fact. You feel energy before it becomes words. You detect lies in micro-expressions. You sense imbalance not as an emotion, but as an embodied knowing. This is shadow work. This is power. And it is born not in force, but in truth. If you've ever been told your anger is too much, your boundaries are too rigid, or your silence is too cold, comment below. My shadow is not a threat. It's my protection. You are not becoming someone new. You are becoming whole. And the person you were always meant to be? They're ready to take the lead. From the ashes of the empath's awakening rises a new archetype. No longer the wounded healer, but the sovereign one. Not broken, not bitter, but whole, watchful, and utterly untouchable. Carl Jung believed in the process of individuation, the path of becoming psychologically whole. It's not a soft path. It demands truth. It demands loss. And most of all, it demands that you stop abandoning yourself in the name of connection. Empaths once lived for others. Every decision filtered through how someone else might feel. Every emotion edited to avoid discomfort. Every need sacrificed on the altar of peacekeeping. But peace without truth is not peace. It's prison. And the sovereign empath has found the key. Neuroscience supports what Jung intuited. Empaths are built differently. Hyperactive mirror neurons make them sensitive to emotional cues most people miss. But now, that sensitivity is no longer used to absorb. It is used to perceive. You become what Jung called a psychological seer. You don't need explanations. You feel the shift in someone's energy before they speak. You don't need evidence. You know the intention behind their words. You are no longer guessing who someone is. You are seeing them entirely. And here's the paradox. As you reclaim your power, you don't become harder. You become deeper, fiercer, but also more discerning. This is what terrifies the narcissist. Because you are no longer in their game of validation and confusion. You no longer react when they provoke. You don't justify your boundaries. You don't perform to earn approval. You simply are. This is sovereignty, the ability to stand inside your own truth. Even when others demand your surrender, you choose who gets access to your energy. You open your heart selectively, not because you're guarded, but because you're wise. And wisdom is not afraid of solitude. In fact, for the sovereign empath, solitude is no longer emptiness, it's space. Space to breathe, to heal, to create. Space to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. Jung warned that power without consciousness becomes destructive. But the sovereign empath is different. Their power is conscious. It's rooted in empathy, but refined by experience. They can love without losing themselves. They can feel deeply without drowning. They can care fiercely without collapsing. And they no longer apologize for that power. If you've reached the point where you no longer feel the need to explain your boundaries, if your silence speaks louder than your defense, comment, "I have nothing to prove." Because your sovereignty is not a performance. It's a presence. You don't need to fight to be heard. You are the voice. You don't need to win every battle. You've left the battlefield. And those who once fed off your energy, they no longer know how to find you. Because you've risen. You're no longer reacting. You're creating. And that, right there, is the beginning of a new life. Let's bring this transformation down to earth. What does an awakened empath look like in the real world? Let's step into 3 familiar scenes, each one a battlefield where empaths have long been outnumbered until they awaken. First, the workplace predator. Sarah was the team player everyone loved, except the one who took credit for her work and blamed her for every mistake. Her colleague wore the perfect mask, charming to the boss, cruel in private. Gaslighting was his favorite weapon. And Sarah? She absorbed it all, questioned herself, worked longer hours to prove her worth. Until one day, she saw the pattern. She remembered Jung's words. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That was her moment. Sarah stopped over-explaining, stopped trying to earn the approval of someone committed to misunderstanding her. She no longer absorbed the tension in meetings. She let it hang in the room. Without her emotional labor, the predator's cracks showed. Others noticed. He lost control, not because she fought back, but because she withdrew her participation. She had become psychologically immune. Now, the family manipulator. Michael grew up with a mother who wielded guilt like a weapon. Every success of his was met with silence. Every boundary met with threats, tears, or the dreaded, "After all I've done for you." He spent decades trying to be a good son, carrying her moods, being her emotional regulator. But when he discovered Jung's concept of the shadow, he realized something devastating. His loyalty was built on fear. Michael didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He simply stopped playing the role. He set boundaries without explanation. He chose his peace over her approval. And slowly, the tantrums stopped. The manipulations fell flat. Why? Because without Michael's energy, the drama couldn't survive. He had become manipulation-proof, and finally, the romantic vampire. Lisa loved deeply, too deeply. She gave everything, her time, her dreams, her emotional safety, to a partner who only took. He praised her sensitivity one moment, then used it to wound her the next. She believed him when he said she was too much, too emotional, too intense. But when Lisa found Jung's teachings on projection, she saw the truth. His criticisms weren't about her. They were about what he couldn't face in himself. So she stopped explaining, stopped defending, stopped shrinking. And when she did, the relationship collapsed. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. Because there was nothing left to feed on. Without her unconscious participation, his illusion of superiority vanished. In each story, the empath didn't become cold. They didn't retaliate. They simply became conscious. They walked out of the roles they were cast in. And the moment they did, the narcissist's script fell apart. If you've ever made someone uncomfortable by standing in your truth, if your silence has caused more panic than your words ever did, comment, "I've stepped off your stage," because the empath's true power doesn't lie in resistance. It lies in refusal. Here's the paradox no narcissist expects, and few empaths fully understand until they awaken. The more deeply an empath integrates their shadow, the more compassionate they become. But their compassion is no longer naive. It's no longer codependent. It's sovereign. This is the empathic paradox. Their heart remains open, but only to truth. They love deeper, but with discernment. They give generously, but selectively. They feel everything, but they no longer absorb what isn't theirs. And that, right there, is terrifying to anyone who once depended on their emotional compliance. Because now, their love has boundaries. Jung believed that true wholeness comes from holding opposites. Light and dark, love and anger, softness and strength. The awakened empath doesn't reject their sensitivity. They refine it. Their pain didn't harden them. It honed them. And now they can do something few can. They can see the game, feel the manipulation, hear the lie, and still stand in compassion. Not the kind of compassion that enables abuse, but the kind that says, "I see your pain, but I will not sacrifice myself to carry it." This is what makes the fed-up empath more dangerous than the narcissist ever imagined. Because now, they are conscious. And unconsciousness cannot be manipulated. They've seen the mirror, shattered it, and stepped through into clarity. They now carry a power that doesn't demand, doesn't beg, doesn't prove. It simply is. And that stillness, that non-reactive grounded presence, It sends shockwaves through every relationship that was built on emotional chaos. Because the narcissist thrives on noise, confusion, reactions. And when you stop reacting, they lose control. Not just over you, but over themselves. They are forced to face the one thing they've spent their entire lives avoiding: their own emptiness. You didn't become cruel. You became clear. You didn't close your heart. You opened it to yourself. If you've ever felt like your love was only valued when it came without boundaries, or your compassion only appreciated when it meant self-sacrifice, comment below, "My love includes me now." Because that's what the empathic paradox really is. You still love, but now you love with eyes wide open. When a single empath awakens, it doesn't just change one relationship, it begins to unravel an entire system. Carl Jung wrote, "The world hangs on a thin thread, and that thread is the psyche of man." And what he meant was this: most of our social structures, families, workplaces, even entire cultures, are built on unconscious agreements. Agreements that empaths must carry the emotional weight, that they must absorb what others deny, that they must maintain peace while others provoke chaos. But what happens when the empath refuses? The entire illusion begins to collapse. This is the empathic revolution, and it's already underway. Because when empaths stop apologizing for their truth, when they stop managing other people's discomfort, when they stop calling exhaustion love and manipulation connection, they become a mirror that forces the world to see itself. Suddenly, what used to be called normal starts to look a lot like abuse. Empaths were never meant to be martyrs for systems built on emotional vampirism. They were meant to be alchemists. And when they stop giving their power away, they begin creating relationships rooted in mutuality, reciprocity, and conscious choice. They form what Jung would call conscious communities, safe, sacred spaces where emotional labor is shared, where boundaries are respected, where drama has no fuel to burn. And here's what's most disruptive. The empath doesn't have to burn anything down. They don't need to fight, expose, or destroy. All they have to do is withdraw. Jung called this the principle of psychological nonviolence. Because when the empath stops participating in dysfunction, that dysfunction starves. Narcissistic dynamics cannot survive without an unconscious empath to feed them. Workplace toxicity can't thrive when no one plays emotional janitor. Family guilt spirals collapse when the good child sets a boundary and sticks to it. This isn't just personal healing, it's collective liberation. If your healing journey has made you less compliant, less available, less easy to control, if your clarity has made people uncomfortable, comment below. I'm not here to shrink, I'm here to evolve. Because your growth isn't the problem, it's the invitation. And not everyone will accept it. Some will lash out, others will fall away. That's okay. The empathic revolution doesn't need everyone to wake up at once. It just needs you to stop falling asleep again. You are not too much. You are exactly what this unconscious world needs to wake up. And when enough empaths reclaim their power, a tipping point is reached. A new paradigm begins, not built on sacrifice, but on sovereignty. This is what happens when empaths rise. They don't destroy the world, they rebuild it. Not all empaths are the same. Jung believed transformation is a path, one of increasing awareness, wholeness, and responsibility. And for the empath, that path has 3 levels. Level 1, the unconscious empath. Here, you feel everything, but understand none of it. You confuse love with obligation. You overgive, over-apologize, and overstay. You absorb emotions that aren't yours and call them empathy. You have no real boundaries, only guilt masquerading as kindness. And the worst part, you think this is just your personality. You're not broken, you're just unawakened. Level 2. The awakening empath. This is where something shifts. You start to see patterns. You begin to question why you're always exhausted, always giving, always fixing. You discover Jung's concepts of projection, the shadow, individuation. You realize you've been complicit in your own depletion, not because you're weak, but because you were asleep. Now, you begin to reclaim your power. Tentatively, imperfectly, but courageously, you start saying no. You stop justifying your worth. You set boundaries, even if your voice shakes. This is the sacred fire of awakening. Level 3. The sovereign empath. You've integrated your shadow. You've stopped leaking energy. You've stopped being drawn to chaos and started choosing peace, even if that means solitude. You now love with wisdom. You feel deeply without drowning. You no longer perform emotional labor for people unwilling to do their own work. You are, as Jung described, individuated, whole unto yourself, centered, clear, unshakable. You don't need to be liked. You don't need to be understood. You don't need to be chosen, because you've chosen yourself. If you recognize yourself in this journey, drop in the comments. I'm becoming sovereign. Because the empath's path isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget. Here's the truth most people miss. The empath's greatest power lies not in what they do, but in what they refuse to do. Carl Jung observed this with precision. In Jung's view, the greatest threat to unconscious systems isn't open combat, but the conscious withdrawal of one's participation. The awakened empath doesn't need to fight the narcissist. They don't need to expose, argue, or prove. They simply stop participating. They step off the emotional battlefield and take their energy with them. And in that withdrawal, something collapses. The narcissist, who once fed on guilt and confusion, suddenly finds themselves starving. The manipulator, who relied on your empathy to mask their control, is now face to face with their own emptiness, because you're no longer carrying it. The drama dies in the silence you leave behind. You don't scream. You don't slam the door. You don't explain. You just stop. Stop absorbing what isn't yours. Stop regulating emotions you didn't create. Stop justifying your existence. Stop confusing self-sacrifice with love. This refusal is not cold. It is clarity. It's not detachment from people. It's detachment from illusion. You are not abandoning anyone. You are reclaiming yourself. Jung called this psychological immunity, the ability to witness others' emotional storms without being pulled into them. The ability to stay grounded in your own truth, even when everything around you demands your surrender. And that power, that refusal to lose yourself again, it's the most dangerous thing the narcissist has ever seen. If you've reached that moment, when you no longer explain, when you no longer react, when your silence speaks volumes, comment, "I've withdrawn my permission." Because you don't need to fight for your worth. You only need to stop giving it away. And the moment you do, the entire system of manipulation begins to crumble. So if you're still watching, let me leave you with this. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not too emotional. You are not too deep. You are exactly what this unconscious world needs to wake up. You are the candle in the dark. And when that candle becomes a wildfire of clarity, It doesn't burn. It transforms. You were never meant to be the emotional dumping ground for other people's shadows. You were meant to illuminate them. You were never meant to earn love through suffering. You were meant to remember that love includes you. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that is your journey now, not to fix those who won't change, but to finally embody your truth, to be the empath who has walked through fire and emerged whole, not a martyr, not a victim, but a sovereign soul with fierce compassion and unshakable clarity. You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. You don't have to explain your boundaries. You are the boundary. You don't have to justify your silence. Your stillness is enough. And those who cannot meet you in your wholeness, they will fall away, because you are no longer a sponge. You are the mirror, and the world is about to see itself. If this message spoke to something inside you, if you've walked through that breaking point, if you're in the shadow work, if you're learning to choose yourself, comment below. I am sovereign in my empathy. Share this video with someone who needs to remember their power. Subscribe for more content that honors your depth, your light, and your transformation. Because the empath's journey is not a weakness. It is a revolution, and it starts with you. See you in the next dimension.